my great pleasure to welcome each and everyone to this international webinar on population growth, natural resources, and human conflicts. Respected principals, Dr. Little Borholla sir, Nandanath Saikia College, Titavor, and respected principal, Dr. Biren Datta sir, Principal, Borholla College, Honorable Research Person, Dr. Little Saikia, my dear colleagues and respected participants. For the last 2 years, the global pandemic changed our lives, and with that came a series of chain reactions no one ever anticipated. But looking at the silver lining, this virtual platform has also opened up doors to organize national as well as international events from the comfort of our homes, which otherwise would have been very difficult in person. It is known to all that the earth is overburdened by indiscriminate consumption of natural resources. The most important factor contributing to this is population explosion. The scarcity of resources combined with the disparity of consumption worldwide has ultimately culminated into human conflicts in various sectors. With this burning global crisis in mind, the Department of Geography, Nandanath Saikia College, and the Department of Economics, Borholla College, had jointly ventured to organize this event addressing this very concern. Once again, I, Dr. Junali Saikia Borkakoti, and my co-convener, Bornali Kolita Dotto, extend our heartfelt welcome to all of you. Today, we have invited an esteemed and highly knowledgeable resource person, Dr. Uday Saikia, who is an associate professor at the College of Humanities, Arts and Sciences at Flinders University, Australia, who has done extensive and high quality research on this field for a long time. It is our proud privilege to have you among us. Welcome, Dr. Uday Saikia, sir. With this, we move on to the inauguration of this webinar. I request Dr. Little Borholla, sir, Principal, NN Saikia College, to inaugurate the event. Sir, please.
Namaskar and good morning to all of you. Distinguished resource person, Dr. Uday Saikia, Associate Professor, College of Humanities, Arts and Sciences, Flinders University, Australia, Mr. Biren Datta, Principal, Borholla College, participant friends from different places, and my dear colleagues. I am very pleased to inaugurate this international webinar on population growth, natural resources, and human conflict. The topic is very much relevant to the present scenario of population explosion, as the whole world is bound to be dependent on limited resources. I am glad to have you all today in this virtual program and appreciate your presence at this difficult time. This type of scientific discussion certainly plays an important role in educating present and future generations on population growth and its impact on the society. In view of the present crisis, the whole world is emphasizing on the need of sustainable utilization of natural resources. And we all should constantly try to mitigate the problem associated with overwhelming population growth. I would like to thank Department of Geography, NN Saikia College, Titavor, and Department of Economics, Borholla College, Borholla, for organizing this webinar, which will definitely redefine the pros and cons of population growth. I welcome all the eminent speakers and guests from different walks of life who have extended their cooperation to share their knowledge and past experiences. My best wishes to all the participants to make use of this program to the best of their abilities. With these rewards, I like to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now it is a joy to see so many keen participants joining for today's talk. I request Dr. Biren Dutta sir, Principal, Borholla College, to welcome the esteemed gathering.
Thank you. Good morning to all the dignitaries as well as our respected participants all over the globe. First of all, I would like to welcome everyone to the international webinar on population growth, natural resource, and human conflict. জনসংখ্যা বৃদ্ধি, প্ৰাকৃতিক সম্পদ আৰু মানৱ সংঘাত. Jointly organized by Department of Economics, Borholla College, and Department of Geography, and Saikia College, Johat. Today, we asked our very esteemed resource person, Dr. Saikia, Associate Professor, College of Humanities and Science, Flinders University, Australia. I am also delighted to inform you that our honorable resource person is from Elengi, Itabor. So we are very much proud for him, and I hope that our youth will get inspiration from our success story and will delightfully help them, and that all our better future. I hereby once again welcomed our resource person to the webinar. The COVID-19 pandemic has scared the world and has affected various aspects of our life, but we should be optimistic and should move on parallelly while battle with COVID-19 is going on. In this webinar, we have an interesting topic of population growth, natural resource, and it's a human conflict. This three aspect has changed the life of the people drastically. I assure that the respectful resource person will definitely give us enormous knowledge, and everyone will be benefited from this webinar. Moreover, I am thankful to the organizing committee for coming up with such a great initiative by organizing this international webinar, and highly welcome to the participants all around the globe. At last, with successful completion of this webinar, thank you for letting me to offer the welcome speech. Hope you all are doing well amidst this pandemic. Stay safe and take care. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, your kind words. Now, I request Sangeeta Saikia, Assistant Professor, Saikia College, Department of Geography, to introduce our honorable research person. Sangeeta. Please unmute yourself. Hello, Sangeeta. Sangeeta, please unmute. Unmute your phone. Sangeeta. Unmute.
Please unmute. Please unmute. Madam, please unmute yourself. Just 1 minute.
Rana, please unmute Sangeeta Saikia.
Yes, yes. Madam, please unmute yourself.
Yes.
Yes, and yeah, now audible. You are audible.
Good morning, everyone. I am privileged to introduce you to our honorable resource person, Dr. Saikia sir. Dr. Saikia is currently working as an associate professor in applied human population studies, geography, College of Humanities, Arts and Social Sciences, Flinders University, Adelaide, Australia. His role includes both teaching and research. The topic he coordinates and teaches includes population dynamics, population environment and sustainable development in a global world, challenges and prospects. He is a social demographer with postgraduate degrees from London School of Economics, United Kingdom, and a PhD from Flinders University, Australia. His research identity is built around evidence-based policy research on population, human well-being, and sustainable development, which he started through research collaboration with the United Nations Development Programme, Papua New Guinea, leading to the production of the Bougainville Human Development Report 2007. He had published over 50 articles and chapters in scholarly journals and books, or as refereed conference papers or reports. The Human Wellbeing Index, which is the most innovative part of his research, has been the core focus of recent human development reports published by the United Nations. Most recently, in his role as the lead author and the team leader, he completed the research project leading to the production of the Human Development Report, Timor-Leste 2018, United Nations Development Programme, a report which focuses on policy pathways to achieve demographic dividend. The impact of his research at this international level is also evident by the fact that he has drawn the attention of policy makers at the highest level in Timor-Leste. He also has extensive experience of working with the United Nations system for last 12 years. His research leadership in his area of expertise has been evident in a series of successful research collaboration, both at national and international level, leading to receiving research grant from several funding agencies, including a recent one through Australian Research Council. Dr. Saikia has many achievements and awards throughout his career, amongst which includes Vice Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Teaching 2011, Citations for Outstanding Contribution to Student Learning 2012, Theo Murphy High Flyers Think Tank Award, Australian Academy of Sciences 2012. He had successfully supervised 11 PhD students, 5 as principal supervisor so far. He served as the Vice President of Australian Population Association, the peak professional body of population research in Australia, for 2 consecutive terms, from 2011 to 2015. He was reappointed as the Vice President for the year 2019 to 2021. He was one of the 3 Australian experts appointed by the International Science Council to review the United Nations Global Report on Sustainable Development. He was a consultant to United Nations Development Programme, Papua New Guinea from 2005 to 2007, India 2013 to 2015, and Timor-Leste 2016 to 2018. He had also been invited as a keynote speaker in many national and international organizations. Dr. Saikia is also involved in many community engagements. He is the project officer of South Australian Support for Children and Women in Assam. The organization assists a number of remote villages in Assam, India, by supporting a range of projects, including teacher salaries, provision of education materials, agricultural projects such as vegetable gardens and mushroom groups, and support for public health initiatives. We are indeed honored to have you here, sir, as our honorable resource person. Thank you. So please welcome Dr. Saikia, sir.
Thank you, Saikia.
Yes.
Thank
My
you.
turn now.
Yeah, it is time for the most awaited event of this webinar, Dr. Uday Saikia sir talk. Sir, I would like to request you to deliver your talk.
Thank you very much, and my sincere apology again for the delay. I was on my way to the office after lunch, and all of a sudden one of my colleagues had a heart attack, and I was nearby him, so I had to take him to the hospital, put him in the emergency, and it took some time. And when I was coming, I saw a journalist's message, and again, my sincere apology for the delay, but I am here now, so which is good. And thanks again for everybody for your kind invitation. As one of the speaker earlier said, that I am originally from Elengi, Titavur. Titavur logot mur bahut sambandh, mur aitar ghor tatei. Tat aru mane horu kaltu Titavur bahut somoy moi kotaisu. But at the outset, I would like to thank both the colleges, Titavur College and also Borholla College, for this kind invitation. It's my pleasure to come online, although it is not face-to-face, but coming online and meeting the people here and sharing my experience, sharing my knowledge with you, it's really fantastic. And without much delay, I would present it today. The topic is, of course, on population, natural resources or environment, and human conflict. So what I'm going to do, I will start sharing my PowerPoint presentation. Hope there is not much technical problem there. But after my presentation, I'm more than happy to spend a bit of a time for any questions and answers. So I have the whole afternoon for you. So it is not just 1 hour. If you want to spend a bit more time, I'm more than happy to spend that time. So I will start sharing generally. So hope I have. So it says one participant can share at a time. So somebody will have to give me or make me host.
Sir, you are already co-host, sir. No problem. You can share, sir. No problem.
Is it okay? That's excellent. So I will do that. Just give me one. Just give me a second, okay?
Okay, sir. No problem. Oh, no, I'm not.
Can you see me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Your slide is visible, sir. Yes, sir.
So what does the slide say? Is it population, environment, human conflict?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, because I'm not sure which slide it is showing now. Okay, so
Population, environment, and human. Yes, sir.
the complex reality. Okay,
yes, sir.
Excellent. So thanks again. So what I'm going to talk about is, of course, the global population growth. I'll give you a little bit of idea first about the global population growth, followed by the impact on environment and natural resources. Then I will talk about the human conflict. So how Can you see my second slide just to make sure that everything is all
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is visible, sir.
excellent,
Yes, sir.
excellent.
The structure and presentation, yes, sir.
Excellent, the structure of the presentation. So what
Yes.
I'm going to do is the current and future trend of global population. I will give you a little bit of idea about what's going on because I am a demographer. And demographer, of course, we do project population globally at national level, at local level. So I'll give you an idea about what's happening. Then I will talk about a little bit on the population and environment relationship from a natural resources perspective, and then the debate about the conflict issues in society. Okay, so when we talk about population issues, population is basically the three factors we talk about: mortality, fertility, and migration. Mortality is death rates, fertility is birth rates, people, the babies born, and migration. When you talk about migration issues at a global level, there is not much point of talking about migration at a global level because population at a global level for the world, it is basically births and deaths, which make the population dynamic change because until now, people cannot migrate out of the world to another planet. You can go, but you cannot migrate out to live in another planet and somebody is not coming in. So in future, it can happen. But when you talk about population at a global level, it is basically the mortality and fertility issues or mortality and birth rate. That's what we talk about. So I will talk from that point of view. It is very difficult to find out what exactly our global population we started with. Global population, if we go back to the history, it's around 5 to 10 million. We started with global population. That is the knowledge we have. 5 to 10 million is almost like 1/4 of Australia's population, which was our global population long time back. That's what we started with. Then, of course, the population started growing. We have then 270 to 330 million. And it started growing again and again. Finally, this graph will give you a very good idea of how rapidly our population started growing. So here you can see now what is the global current population. Global current population is now 8 billion total population, 8 billion. Now the United Nations is projecting that the global population will reach 11 billion, in fact, by 2100. That means whatever our population currently is, which is 8 billion, we are going to add another 30% of the population by 2100. But the good news is that after 2100, world population will start shrinking. So until next 80 years, we are going to see population growth. So that means 30% we are going to add more to our current population. This particular graph shows you how quickly we started growing. The first 1 billion population was in the year 1800. Then to add next 1 billion, that means from jumping from 1 billion to next 1 billion, when we became 2 billion, it almost took 130 years. But after that, to add every billion, we took less and less time. It was 130 years first time, then the second one is only 30 years. That means we jumped so quickly. Then it took 14 years, and recently we are taking around 12 years. It shows that the population started growing very rapidly from 1900 onwards. So those who now we feel that already we are crowded from an environmental perspective, from economic perspective, from social perspective, all different aspects, if we are feeling already crowded, you can imagine our next generation, in next 80 years, if we are having another 30% more population, how they are going to face the challenges. The climate change is coming and all the issues are. So to sum up about the world population, although it is growing worldwide, there is a divide between developed and developing countries. It is more rapidly growing in developing countries compared to developed countries. In the last 100 years, in the last century, from 1900 to 2000, the world population at the beginning of 1900, it was only 1.65 billion. Then in 100 years, it jumped to 6.1 billion. This is very huge in last 100 years. But whereas in developed countries, it jumped from less than 1 billion to 1.2 billion only. So the rapidity of growth in developed countries in the last century was much less. If you compare it to developing country, of course, it jumped from 1.1 to 4.9 billion with a 1.5% growth every year. So this particular slide shows that, yes, population is growing. In last century, it grew quite rapidly, and now also it is growing, but it is mostly happening in developing countries. Now, 85% of the population growth in the last century happened from developing countries. At the beginning of the century, the developing countries had 67% of the world population, but now at the end of last century, in 2000, that 67% jumped to 81%. So the clear message from this kind of data, it shows that most of the world population are growing from the developing countries rather than developed countries. Now, mostly we talk about population growth, but at the same time, it is also important to see not only the total population growth, but what is the age structure of population growth. This is just for your knowledge, especially those students today who are attending it. It is very important to know that whenever we talk about population, it is not just a question of total population, but within the same population, what is the age structure, how we are growing. So this particular graph gives you a very good idea about the population growth structure between developed and developing countries. The left-hand side is a typical developed country. It is called population pyramid. Population pyramid starts from the age 0 from x-axis. If you go up, it is elderly population, more old population, and different color represents the gender, male and female. So the left-hand side, which is more kind of a flat one, it shows the developed countries' age structure, where number of children and elderly population proportion is less compared to economically productive age group. Economically productive age group is considered to be 15 to 60 age period. So the left-hand side is a very typical developed country age structure, which is almost kind of a flat. Whereas the right-hand side one is a very typical pyramid, which is a developing country. So the developing countries age structure, you can see there are a lot of infants and children because the base is very, very high, because it is fertility is high, the population growth is high. That's why the shape is like that. So if you see a diagram like that, if you are reading an article on demography, then if you see a structure which is on the right-hand side, then immediately you will know that they are talking about developing countries. Whereas on the left-hand side, it is more about developed countries. So some other definitions, because I'm going to address the debate about population growth, environment, and resources and social conflict, I thought that it is important that you need to know some of the concepts, because I'm addressing here not only the scholars and the faculty members present here, but I understand there are a lot of students also here. So some of these slides are for the students to know about some of these conceptual issues so that you understand the debate a bit more better. So some concepts are like the total fertility rate. In demography, we use a terminology called TFR, total fertility rate. In one way, it represents the birth rate. So the birth rate is in the reproductive age group 15 to 49 for women. For women, we consider it is a reproductive age group. That means bacha শিশু জন্ম দিয়াৰ যিটো বয়স মহিলাৰ কাৰণে 15 পৰা 49 age group ভিতৰত ধৰা হয়. So on an average, in that age group, number of babies born to any woman is called TFR, total fertility rate. So for India, I think for India, total fertility rate currently is around 2. If I'm not mistaken, it is around 2.4. That means on an average, a woman in India is giving birth to 2.4 children. 2.4 is a more statistical term, but you can say between 2 to 3 children. So like Australia, where I am currently living, the total fertility rate is around 1.8. That means it is on an average, women here in Australia are producing a bit less than 2 children. So that is total fertility rate. The other one is called replacement level fertility rate. Replacement level fertility rate is when the total fertility rate is 2. It is called replacement. Replacement means you are replacing the father and the mother by producing 2 children. So in one way, replacement level fertility is like a more stable population. That means exactly the father and the mother is replaced by producing 2 children. It is called replacement level fertility. Sometimes we take it not as 2, we take it in statistical terminology, we take it as 2.1 because it is assumed that not every baby is born will survive because there is a death involved in it. Not every baby survives. That's why we take it a little bit higher, 2.1. But on an average, you can remember that 2 is a kind of a replacement level fertility. Then also we talk about life expectancy, that how many years, when the baby is born, suppose today, depending on the health condition, depending on the economic situation in the country, depending on many other factors, how many years the baby can expect to live, that is called life expectancy. So for every country, we can measure the life expectancy. Like for Australia, the life expectancy is currently around 83, 84, whereas for India, I think it is around 67 and 68. Most of the developing countries, of course, the life expectancy is lower than many developed countries. So these are some concepts. Now, although I say that mostly it is happening in developed countries, I mean, the slowdown of population or less fertility in developed countries, but also developing countries showing very good sign of fertility decline in birth rate. So some examples I'm giving here. There are 2 countries like Tunisia and Dominican Republic, Brazil and Thailand, there where the fertility rate is almost like developed country. It is declining at a very rapid pace. Even in India, the fertility is declining quite rapidly. If you see some latest data, some of those states like West Bengal, I remember, and few other states where fertility rate has dropped below replacement. That means in India too, couples are not producing more than 2 babies. In fact, it is more like going towards 1. I think Kerala is another state where total fertility rate, birth rate is very, very low, like developed countries. But at the same time, most of the high fertility countries are in sub-Saharan Africa. These are the examples: Niger, Zambia, Nigeria, Ghana, where fertility rate is very, very high. They are producing on an average around 7 to 8 children currently. This is the current situation. So in Africa, many countries still producing at a very high fertility rate. So what it represents is that most of the population growth in the future, the contribution to the global population will come from Africa and sub-Saharan African countries, and also to some extent some other Asian countries. Whereas in the Western countries, US, Italy, Germany, it is a fertility crisis. As I said, they are producing below replacement level. You can see here in Germany, the fertility rate is around 1.3, 1.2. So they are producing on an average 1 children in many of these Western countries. So to sum up about this particular slide gives you a comparative analysis of developed and developing countries. I will not go much in detail. I'll jump this particular slide. So this is a good news. Now, whatever I said so far about population growth, yes, it is a bit scary. First thing, remember, it is scary. We are going to add another 30% population to our world population. That means we are going to have around 11 billion. We have 8 billion now. We are going to have 11 billion by 2100. But the good news is that it is increasing at a declining rate. Again, the students who are listening to me, please remember after my presentation today, if somebody asks you, what was the key message that I presented you today, you can definitely say, yes, the total population is going to increase to around 11 billion. I'm talking about total, but the pace, the speed at what the total population will increase is declining. That means the population will increase at a declining rate. In one way, I can say the গাড়ীখন আমি চলাই আছো, গাড়ীখন আগবাঢ়ি গৈ আছে, এতিয়াও আগবাঢ়ি গৈ থাকিব, কিন্তু গাড়ীখনৰ স্পীডটো কমি যাব, কিন্তু আমি আগবাঢ়ি গৈ আছো. That means we are adding total population, but at a declining rate. That is the key message. Now, the top 10 fertility countries where birth rate is the highest in the world now, currently the top 10 are all from Africa. You can see from this graph, they're all from Africa. Now the bottom, where the birth rate, the fertility rate is the lowest, the bottom 10, attakke talar country in the world, they are kind of a mix. There are some from Europe and also some from Asia. You can see Hong Kong, China, Korea. These are some of those Asian countries where fertility, birth rate is very, very low. They are in the bottom 10 of fertility rate. So up to here, this is the end of my first section of the presentation. That the key message, yes, population is growing. We are going to see 30% more, 11.2 billion. But good news, with a good news that from 2100, that means 80 বছৰ পাছৰ পৰা আমি population to shrink কৰা দেখা পাম, লাহে লাহে কমি যাব, কিন্তু 80 বছৰলৈকে up to now next 80 years population increase হৈ গৈ থাকিব, it will increase. Now let's go to the population and environment view. What is the two main views? Basically, there are three views, but I'm presenting here two. How do we relate this population growth to environmental issues, to natural resources issues? The two extreme views, one is called pessimistic view, which is Malthus, Neo-Malthusian, who Malthus was the one who introduced that pessimistic view. According to Malthus, if we keep growing, like if we keep growing, the population keep growing without control, that unchecked, then the society will collapse. Because what Malthus said, he compared the population growth with the growth of food production. So what he said, I'm not going to go much detail about it, but very simply what he said is that population grows in a geometric progression. That means, suppose if it is 2, next is 4, then multiplied by 2 again, 8, 2, 8, 2, 4, 8, 16, like a geometric progression. Whereas food production is a more arithmetic progression. That means 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. You plus it. So because population is growing in a geometric progression and food production in the world is in an arithmetic progression, so there is a gap between food production and population. That was his main theory. And as a result of that, there will be a lot of people will go hungry and poverty will come, and that will lead to a social collapse, the collapse of the society. That was his pessimistic view. And a lot of people still believe that. The other one is an optimistic view. Optimistic view, they say, it is basically coming from the economists. They said, don't blame population growth. Population growth of dukh nidiu, dibo nalage. Kionu? Because they say that without population growth, there won't be any demand in the society. So if we do not have any demand, there will not be any scientific innovation. And without scientific innovation, our standard of living will go down. So basically what they are saying, that population growth leads to higher demand in the economy. And once the demand goes up, this leads to scientific innovation. And that kind of scientific progress, scientific innovation leads to better levels, standard of living. So they are very optimistic. Now, within these two views, let's address the debate, how we need to be careful. Some other concepts, these are another 2 slides. I will introduce some more concepts, then we'll go to the debate, because it is important again to know the concept so that we understand the debate a bit more. So those who are doing some environmental studies or geography, those who come from geography background, you will understand a bit better, because we need to differentiate between the 2 words. One is called natural reserve, one is called natural resources. So natural resources covers everything. some of those natural resources, probably we have a good knowledge of it, and some we don't know where it is. So combining all known quantity and unknown quantity together is called resources. Whatever is there on the earth, some of them we are extracting, some we have a knowledge that it exists, but some we don't know where it exists or not. So if we combine them, this is called natural resources total. But within the resources, if we can extract them, that means if suppose in a country like India, we have a lot of natural resources, but all the resources we cannot extract it because we may not, first thing, we may not have the economic capacity because we may not have that much of money to extract everything. Second is we may not have the technology, that means the technology required to extract. And third thing, most importantly, that it is culturally, socially or culturally, sometimes it is very inappropriate to have a mining or extract the natural resources because that land have a, suppose it may have a cultural value. So we should not extract resources from that. So if these three conditions are fulfilled, that means if we can economically, we have the capacity, technologically, we have the capacity to extract it, and culturally, if it is appropriate, then it is called reserve. That means reserve is a subset of the resources. I think this particular diagram will give you an idea. The resource is the entire thing, but it does not mean that everything you can get it. Only thing you can get is the reserve, where you have the economic capacity, you have the technological capacity, and it is culturally or socially appropriate to extract it. For suppose the cultural appropriateness, I can tell you, I'm in Australia. Here, the Aboriginal communities or the indigenous communities, they have the sacred land. So there may be a lot of resources there because those land belong, I mean, they have a cultural connection, the social connection to the community. We are not allowed to touch those land to extract resources. This is culturally not appropriate. So that means that is not our reserve. That is resources, but that is not our reserve because culturally it is not appropriate. So those are some of the concepts we need to be very careful. Now, the other thing is the biocapacity. When we talk about the debate, that every country has a maximum biocapacity, what we can have. So and that biocapacity is very important in the debate, that every country or any geographical region, the biocapacity refers to the amount of biologically productive land and water areas available within boundaries of a given country. So how much it is available, land and water, in terms of our consumption. That is called biocapacity. Then finally, it is the ecological footprint. Ecological footprint is the most important concept here in this debate. Ecological footprint, in a very layman terms, is it reflects our consumption lifestyle. Suppose what happens is the ecological footprint. Ecological footprint represents how much we are consuming to satisfy our lifestyle, how much we are consuming the natural resources from the earth, how much natural resources we need to convert to satisfy our demand, our lifestyle. So higher the ecological footprint is bad. That means we should reduce our ecological footprint. That means we should control our consumption lifestyle so that the pressure we put on earth is less and less. So that concept will come in the debate. Then the other one is ecological overshoot. That means if our ecological footprint is very high, higher than our biocapacity, then that means we are overshooting it. That means we are consuming too much, and that is not good again. So now, if you see the world population, and now let's come to the real picture. So what is the world biocapacity? As you can see in this graph, the biocapacity, world biocapacity is the green curve, but ecological overshoot, that means our consumption is in the world. If you take a global citizen, that our consumption is already very high compared to the total biocapacity in the world. So that means already we are destroying the earth more than what the capacity is. So that is a global scenario. Now, if you compare the developed countries, they have the highest ecological footprint. That means the consumption in developed countries, per capita consumption is very, very high. Okay, again, remember, ecological footprint is measured per capita, per person. That means, suppose here, let me give an example. OECD countries, the ecological footprint is 7.22. 7.22 means to satisfy the lifestyle in OECD countries, whatever our demand is for any goods, services, all these things which comes from the nature, basically all the things we get, it comes originally from the nature because we convert it. So to satisfy my demand in a OECD country, if I'm a person in OECD country, if I'm a citizen of OECD country, then my ecological footprint is 7.22. That means to satisfy my demand, I need a land area almost around 7.22 hectare per person. We are converting it to the land area to satisfy that demand. So just to make it easy, we convert the demand into amount of land required to satisfy that demand. So the 7.22 is very, very high, whereas its biocapacity is only 3.42. That means there is a deficit of 3.80. That means we are overshooting. So this particular slide gives you an idea about what's happening in America and other OECD countries. In Africa, there is, in some extent, sometimes it is an ecological surplus and sometimes a bit of an ecological deficit, but the ecological deficit is very, very less in Africa. So now the question comes here. If the ecological footprint is very high in developed countries, compared to developing countries, তাৰমানে দুখীয়া দেশবিলাকত যদি আমাৰ natural resources ওপৰত pressure per capita is less compared to developed countries like Australia, UK, or America. If I compare sub-Saharan Africa to US or somewhere, then it definitely shows that the ecological footprint in African countries and other developing countries is much less compared to developed countries. Then this brings the debate whether it is true, we should blame the population growth in sub-Saharan Africa or other developing countries, because the population is growing in developing countries. That is very true. But the pressure on earth, per capita pressure, per person pressure on earth resources is much less in developing countries. So that's why I keep repeating is that don't jump to the conclusion that total population is to be blamed. We need to consider the consumption factor, because developing countries' consumption is very, very less. So yes, population is growing there, but they have a better lifestyle, which is much sustainable than developed countries. So a developed country like Australia with a very small population can destroy the earth more than a country with a very high population like in Africa. So we need to be very careful. So this particular example will give you a very clear idea. So from an ecological point of view, one baby born in the United States is equivalent to 32 born in Kenya. তাৰমানে America জন্ম হোৱা এটা বেবিয়ে the pressure resources पर जिमान pressure দিয়ে baby nappies पर आरंभ কৰি all the luxuries, a baby born in America, the amount of pressure it puts on earth is equivalent to 32 born in Kenya in an African country. So why to blame then Kenya for having 32 babies? It's one baby in America itself is destroying much more than Kenya. So that is where the debate becomes very, very complex. And we need to be very careful from a policy making, from a blaming the countries for population growth. So the key message is that it is the consumption factor that we need to be careful about. So it shows where Australia, United States, and Canada, the footprint is much higher. It is red. Interestingly, India, China, and to some extent overall Africa, we still have a deficit. That is true. But the deficit is much less than the developed countries. Like United States is minus 4.6. Australia is a bit different because its biocapacity is still very high. But it does not mean that we should consume more. Biocapacity high does not give us the right to destroy more. So that is a very wrong concept. Don't get misled by that the difference is still positive. Does not mean that we should have a very high ecological footprint. But the overall, India and China, still we are going for a deficit, but deficit is much less than America. But the danger is that India and China, we are changing. We are changing in our consumption style very rapidly. And there is a danger in it. Unless we control our consumption lifestyle, especially in the urban areas, then we have a big danger. And you can imagine in both these countries have around 3 billion population together, which is almost 40% of the total world population. And if our consumption goes up like America, what will happen to the earth? Then this particular graph, this is a very, very interesting graph. What it shows, it divides the globe into 1 year. Just imagine that in our lifestyle, we have only 1 year. Just imagine that we live only up to 1 year. And I start my first day in the life on 1st of January. Now, this particular graph gives, okay, first one is, you can't probably see it very clearly. The first one is called 9 February Qatar. That means the lifestyle in Qatar, which is a very rich country, if the world becomes the lifestyle of Qatar, then world can only, if they start the world on 1st of January, then only it can survive until 9th of February. Just imagine that whole world becomes the lifestyle of Qatar, then we can survive in 1 year only up to 9th of February. That means only 1 month, a little bit higher than 1 month. So that way, most of the developed countries, you will see the less and less. Now, at the other end, Indonesia, Indonesia's lifestyle is more sustainable than many other countries. So if the entire world becomes the lifestyle of Indonesia, then we can survive. If we start our life on 1st of January, then we can go until 18th of December. So that is the equation it shows. Then we can interpret it that 1 year to, in a more, in a life cycle in more years. Now, this is how lifestyle is changing. This is very interesting again. The 120 liters of water is required for 1 glass of wine. Australia is famous for wine. I am in a state here, South Australia. We produce a lot of wine. But amazingly, 1 glass of wine, to produce 1 glass of wine, we need 120 liters of water. It is so much of water consumption. And this is a lifestyle. This is consumption. Now, the problem is that, I don't know, probably our generation, like journalist generation and all, when we grew up, we never heard about wine in India. We never saw wine. I didn't know what was wine. I knew something, hard drinks and all this thing. Wine was never a culture. Now, if I go to India, wine is almost everybody knows. You can get wines everywhere. And I was surprised to see in Jorhat itself, a lot of Australian wine. So there is a market there in India. It is not only in India, it is happening in China. A big wine demand for wine. A lot of Australian wine, a lot of French wine. It's imported to China. So there's a growing demand for wine. So the consumption is changing. Lifestyle is changing in India and China as well, which is putting pressure directly or indirectly on natural resources like the water scarcity. And you can imagine India and China, we have almost, I keep repeating, that we have almost around 3 billion people, almost 40% of the world population. Now you can imagine tomorrow, India and China, everybody starts drinking wine. Then what happens to our natural resources? What happens to our water availability? The similar kind of example of consumption of meat. This is particular beef consumption I'm giving. 1 kilo of beef needs 15,400 liters of water to produce beef in a farming technology. That is huge. And this is not my statistics. This is statistics produced by Food and Agricultural Organization. This is one of the big body attached to the United Nations. So you can see at the same time, the beef consumption, eating meat and all this thing is increasing so rapidly in many developing countries, including India and China. So these are some of the statistics. Let's go to the conflict issue. This is the main theme of my presentation today. So then, can we blame for social conflict? Okay, population is growing, which is, everybody agrees to that, no problem. We have limited resources, everybody agrees to that. Then, of course, the debate of consumption is there. But at the same time, what we have to also agree is that, yes, it is true. With the population increase, there is a pressure on resources and resource scarcity will happen. Now, how true to blame that resource, because of the resource scarcity, we have social conflict, because now countries are fighting for oil, countries are fighting for water, countries are fighting for other natural resources. It has been happening, from colonial times, and it's going to happen more and more. Now, do we blame population for that? Is it population growth is leading to kind of scarcity and then the social conflict in the society, between countries, within the society? That is where I'm going to address this one. The simple concept is that, the classical model, it says that population grows, it leads to resource scarcity. If the resources are not available, then we have the economic stagnation, economic growth cannot happen. Then we compete for resources, and that kind of, once we compete for resources, it can lead to armed conflict. That means people can go violent because resources are not available. And they're also predicting, because of the climate change, it is going to happen more and more, because a lot of environmental refugees will be there. People will be fighting for the food, and all the Malthus will come back. That Malthusian theory might come back. That is the prediction. But is it really the true picture? Can we blame the scarcity? Is it scarcity of the resources is to be blamed for the conflict, which is mainly coming from population growth? So that is what I'm trying to say here. But what the other group is saying against Malthus, they're saying that, no, don't blame scarcity. Scarcity is not an issue. They're saying that it is not the scarcity of resources, but the abundance of natural resources, which is in fact leading to conflict. They're saying that not the poor people are fighting for resources. It is the rich people who get attracted to the abundance of natural resources, which is leading to the social conflict. So in one way, they are saying that it is not the scarcity which is the conflict, source of conflict, but the abundance of it is very completely opposite view. So, and how they are supporting, they are saying the honeypot hypothesis. One is called honeypot hypothesis, and the other one is resource curse hypothesis. Honeypot hypothesis is that it's the abundance of resources, and then the people get attracted to the resources, and rich countries try to exploit that resources, and as a result, it leads to conflict. And the other hypothesis is that once a country, a government, suppose in a country it sees that a lot of natural resources, all of a sudden they found a source of natural resources, then they put all the investment to get that resources. As a result of that, there's an imbalance. The budget is allocated more towards that resources, and we reduce our allocation for education, we reduce our allocation for health. We are more concerned about getting that resources. So the mismatch in the budget allocation, and as a result of less importance given to health, education, and all these things, it leads to social conflict. So overall, this hypothesis says that don't blame the scarcity, resource নোহোৱা কাৰণে নহয়, but resource abundance থকাৰ কাৰণেহে conflict সৃষ্টি হয়. So my personal view, I do not have a very strict view about which one is true, which one is not. Probably I do support to a large extent that it is abundance. In fact, if we historically see the results, you will see that it is not scarcity that led to conflict. In fact, it is the abundance. What you can say to our সম্পদৰ কাৰণে লোভ, সেই লোভটোৰ কাৰণে আমি কনফ্লিক্টত যাওঁ. It is not because of scarcity. And I will now, how do I prove that. What I will do is I'll give you an example from my experience here. Again, you don't have to go by what I say. You have your own opinion. But I will give you some examples of a small island where I spent around 1.5 years on and off, 2007 to 2008. This island is called Bougainville. Amar jitu Bougainville full koise fullor he eke name Bougainville. It was given by a French explorer. The Bougainville Island is a part of a country called Papua New Guinea. Probably you have heard about Papua New Guinea. So Bougainville is a part of, now it is a part of Papua New Guinea. So I was there working for the United Nations in 2007 and 2009, working for the Human Development Report with the Bougainville government and UN, United States. Some other thing, probably you'll be interested to know. When I arrived in Bougainville, I was surprised, Bougainville, to see that tar manu bilake tamul khai. Moi ketiao jana nasilu je Ahomor manuhor bahira onno kobat jagat tamul khai. So the people in Bougainville tat dekhilu je rasta datit tamul besi ase. Kitu tat olop belek dhorone khai tamul tu. Amar jeneke ami phali khao. Tat tamul tu phali nakhai guta ke tamul tu di die kamuribole die. Aru pan tu nakhai panor thari tu khai. Aru sun kini powder hoy. Olop khwar niyam tu belek kintu ekei tamul khali khub murot dhore. Murtu dekhi birat bhal lagile for the first time in a different country which I never imagined the tamul pam boli. Ma khalu kintu khub murot dhore. So there are a lot of cultural similarities in that island, and this is the map. It is very difficult to find the here in this one, but this is a part of Papua New Guinea now. So 30,000 years ago, it has been inhabited by people for 30,000 years. It was named after a French explorer. What happened in the Bougainville? The story is very tragic. Bougainville was a part of a different country. It is called Solomon Islands initially. And all of a sudden, some companies, and Bougainville used to be a very happy, very highly educated society. Although they are very traditional, very rural, very village-based lifestyle, but they were very happy. They were never involved in any mining or anything like that. They always used to live with the nature. Everything they produce from the nature, they're extremely happy and highly educated society. But all of a sudden in 1960, they found a rich mineral, not the people there, but somebody from outside. They discovered rich mineral deposits of copper and gold and silver. And those were the colonial power, like colonial power from Germany, from France, and many other colonial power came there. And they saw there are a lot of minings. So they started the mining. In Australia was also involved in that, unfortunately. So they started mining. And as a result of that, initially the local people there, they didn't know what was going on because they were never interested in mining. They were more about their own forest. They were getting their products. They were happy. And all of a sudden, these colonial countries with their multinational companies, they came here, they saw the gold and copper, they started mining this small island. And initially the people didn't know what was going on, they were very quiet. But as the mining started more and more, they started feeling the pressure on the environment. They saw the deforestation happening. They started cutting down the trees to have more minings there. Then they also saw loss of land because they forcefully took the land from the community. And interestingly, in Bougainville, the land was owned by women. It's like Khasi society in Isina. Mane land to own by women, basically. Mohila hakolor pai. And when they grabbed the land forcefully from the women to start mining, then they started feeling the pressure. And although they were quiet, when they started feeling the pressure, they started revolting against it. They said, what's happening? What's happening to our forest? What's happening to our environment? And they started fighting against these mining companies. And that is the time Papua New Guinea government also kind of joined the international forces, international companies to get so that they can get some money out of it. And that fight began against these international companies, and it went for more than 10 years. They lost quite a lot of people. A lot of people were killed. The community people were killed in the conflict. And unfortunately, Australian government also helped the Papua New Guinea government and other international companies to torture the Bougainvillians. So that continued, and this is a quote from one of the women when I visited. So what happened is that after the conflict, finally, they won. They won the war against these multinational companies. So they got a kind of an autonomous status. It's a not fully independent country. They got some autonomy, political autonomy in the year 2005. So it became separated from Papua New Guinea. It has their own president, and they won the fight against multinational company to stop the mining. And this is one of the quotes from a lady who was leading the fight, who said, "Land is our life, land is our physical life, food and sustenance. Land is our social life. It is a marriage, it is status, it is security, it is politics. In fact, it is the only world. When you take our land, you cut our very heart of the existence." So much, there's so much associated with the land they have. So if you take it away forcefully for mining, they lose everything, their identity. So this is the lady I met. So what happened in 2005, they got semi-autonomous kind of independence, and they had their first president. That is the time they wanted to have some policy document to start their new policies. And I got the opportunity to join the United Nations, Rashtrasangher logot goi, moi tat kam koribole subida palu to have a policy document for them, how to go ahead with their policies. So when I arrived, I took some photographs there. You can see these were from that island. It is in hospital during the conflict. First thing, the opposition, that means the foreign forces, they destroyed is the hospital. The second one is a shopping center there. You know, one of the modern asile, but they destroyed those two things, and I took some photographs. But once they got independence, they started feeling more happy now. So what they are saying, when I went, it's a full of forest, the whole island. In fact, it is also full of coconuts. I think I may have, yes. What they said, when I met the president for the first time, he said, because we wanted to produce the Human Development Report for the island with the help of United Nations, the president we invited for the inauguration of that project, the president of the island whom we met, he said that I want to build my island. I want to develop my island based on our own resources, not from others' help. With whatever we have it, based on our natural resources, based on our own lifestyle. He did not talk about all computers and everything and high-tech thing. He says, whatever resources we have, we are happy, we want to build that. And when I visited the inside the forest, some of those NGOs have written these things, which has really helped me to understand a lot of issues. I didn't know that much of knowledge before. When I talk to the community, the young guys, the young people inside the forest, their knowledge level about the natural resources, about their country is so high. I learned so much from them. And that was really helpful. And some of the posters, I took some photographs there. And this is very interesting here, because they don't want to use petrol and diesel and all these things for their cars, and they have coconut, narikol bahut ase ta. So they introduced a new technology. They run their vehicles in coconut oil. So they're very proud of it. Narikol tele tahator gari bilak solai. Because there are plenty of coconuts here. In fact, when I walk there, it's coconuts everywhere. It is full of coconuts. So they are using the coconuts to run their vehicles from their own resource, and they are proud of it. And what the message I'm trying to give you from this case study is that this island was destroyed. They have high fertility, they have a population growth, but this island was destroyed not because of their population growth. Not the scarcity is not because of their own population growth. The scarcity was because the abundance of resources, somebody saw it from outside. They attacked the island and they destroyed it, which led to social conflict. And many of the Asia Pacific small islands, you will find this is happening rather than the population growth issue as the scarcity creating. And I took some photographs with these three ladies there. They were in fact leading the movement against these mining companies. These three ladies, they were nominated for Nobel Peace Prize. They did not get it, but they were nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. And I was talking to them all the time to understand what's happening in the island. And in fact, one of them I invited to my university in Australia to give a keynote speech. And she did not use any PowerPoint. She spoke from the heart and it was fantastic. Everybody loved it. So this is where it is. And in the island, still, they do not have many bridges and all. There are many rivers in the island. If you start from one end, it's a small island, it's not a huge island. So one end to the other end, it takes almost probably around 22 hours to cross the entire island. And when you cross the entire island, there are many rivers, it doesn't have bridges. So the car goes inside the water and it comes. So when our car went in, then I was very surprised because my colleague told me that there's no bridge, the car goes in the water, then it drives. So first I thought it was a joke, but it was not joke. In fact, you can see in the photograph, it is how they are coping with. So I gave you, there are some other photographs in our meeting with them. And this is a quote from the president: "We will build our nation with a development agenda predominantly based on our own values, own tradition, and own culture." The president, unfortunately, the president died recently. So I have spoken quite a lot. So what my key message from the presentation today is that yes, population is an issue. Definitely, we are going to have another 30% more. But I think we can still live sustainably if we change our consumption lifestyle. The conflict will not happen if we distribute our resources, global resources, equally, helping the developing countries as well for the resources rather than consuming everything in developed countries. So still we have the capacity to survive strongly, but the key point will be how we consume. And that would be my answer for everybody. Thank you. I'll stop it here and I will more than welcome any questions. Thanks, Jonali. Can you hear me, Jonali?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Saikia sir. You very beautifully explained that the population growth is not the prime causes for pressure on resources, but rather the consumption behavior is the main cause. And you highlight many concepts, and I think our participants are very much benefited from your talks. Now I go to interaction section, and I request you to interact with our participant in Assamese also.
Okay, sure, definitely.
Many of our participants are students, so you are most welcome if you say some in our own language also. And I request Rana Bora and Anamika Saikia to conduct the session.
Okay. মই অসমীয়াত ক'বলৈ ভাল পাম। কোনোবাই সুধিলেও মই কোৱেশ্চনটো অসমীয়াতে সুধিব পাৰিম, আনসাৰটো অসমীয়াতে।
অসমীয়াত কৰিবলৈ পালে আমাৰ পাৰ্টিসিপেন্ট সকলো ভাল পাব।
Okay, thank you, Madam Jonali, Madam. Thank you on our honorary resource person, sir, for a very wonderful and widely deliberation. You have compared the overall world statistics. That's about the population, about the requirement of food. You have elaborated all these things very much beautifully and with life example, from Australian example to American example to our local example up to Jorhat Titabar also. It's very interesting, sir. I think it is our participants are will be very much benefited from your deliberation, sir. Thank you, sir. Now I'd like to request our participants, honorable participants who are in Zoom and platform, to ask question directly or write in chat box, and our YouTube participants who are viewing your lecture in YouTube mode, I'd like to request them to write in the YouTube. We will put before our resource person. So I'm again requesting all to put their questions either in chat box or from Zoom platform directly. So please
unmute kori disa soboke participant.
Okay. I will unmute them.
Is soboke unmute kori dile question khudibon maribo na?
Yes, sir. Please raise your hand if you have any question. We will unmute you. Please raise your hand. We'll unmute you. Please raise your hand.
Oli
Sir,
Voklin
yes,
has one question. Please proceed.
Okay, sir. Yes.
Yes, Polly.
Yes, you may ask question, madam.
I think it's muted.
Oli,
You have to unmute Polly. I think you have to unmute Polly.
Yes, we are giving permission to the madam. You can unmute yourself, madam, no problem.
Oh, okay. It was really wonderful listening to you, Dr. Saikia. And I don't know how to address you because you're my brother-in-law in some way. And you are also some sort of mentor to me. I've been following you in different fields. And it was really lovely listening to you and your deliberation, and also adding new perspective to the whole concept of development, which from my perception, I was looking at that. Somewhere I felt that while deliberating your opinions, personal opinions, I felt a happiness index also coming in. So yeah, that's what, like when we talk about development, what is true development? Is it some sort of maldevelopment which is happening because development is making us sad? And so how do you, I saw it there, so I thought maybe I should ask you, like, how happiness comes in when we talk about development, and how you talked about sustainability, but I saw that happiness was also there when you're talking about Bougainville island. So how happiness matter in the context of development, and why it is not taken so much into value? There are certain countries who are working on that. Bhutan is that, and you are also working on that issue. So why it is not still a main focus or main agenda when we talk about development? That is my question.
Thanks, Polly.
It's okay.
It's an excellent question. In fact, happiness or well-being. So what happened is that traditionally the whole concept of development, if you start from American President Truman some 100 years back, he was the one who said to the rest of the world that if you want to be developed, be like America. That was the start of the concept of development. And in his message, what he indicated that if you want to be developed, you have to be rich like America. And that trend started, and all the countries, the agenda was the development is economic growth. And that was the mistake we did in developing countries as well. And that particular agenda of conceptualizing development as a more economic growth concept dominated, including India. And if you see all the developing countries who got independence around 1950, most of the countries who got independence after the Second World War. So every country after independence, they jumped into the concept of economic development, heavy industrialization and all. And we saw the destruction because of that happen. And it was a not looking back, it was more keep progressing through economic development. The realization started coming around 1960, 1970, when we saw how the concept of economic growth has put pressure not only on environment, but also human happiness, human well-being, our health, and all these things, pollution, everything, climate change. So now, many developed countries, interestingly, who dominated this concept of economic growth as a development pathway, now they are integrating this concept of happiness or well-being into their agenda. Whereas many developing countries are still continuing in that pathway. What I want to mean is that now developed countries, they're getting back to that welfare, not just growth, economic growth from an economic welfare concept, where human happiness, human well-being is a core idea. Like I can give you an example of my own state in South Australia. South Australia had a Ministry of Well-being. Not many countries have Ministry of Well-being. So they have allocation of budget for Ministry of Well-being or Ministry of Happiness in one way, say. So they are kind of going back, no, not going back, they are kind of integrating the concept of happiness and well-being into their economic agenda. And which is happening, unfortunately, the developing countries are lagging far behind. We had our own lifestyle, which was very much happiness-oriented or well-being oriented before. But because we stepped into a very wrong process, it will take some time. And I think at one point, the world will realize that this is economic growth concept is destroying us environmentally, mentally, physically, and everywhere. So I think there will be a time where this realization will come. It is coming, and probably we are going in a positive direction, but countries like India and China will have to be very careful that we integrate that well-being concept or happiness concept into it. And as you know, the Bhutan is taking it leadership through the happiness concept. So that is my answer. But I'm positive that we will take a good step in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I already unmuted, allowed to unmute the participants themselves. They can ask directly. Or otherwise, one question is in the chat box, Biplop Sarkar. You want to know about, sir, which ecological footprint between developed is acceptable for sustainable lifestyles?
Which ecological footprint
is acceptable for sustainable lifestyles?
See, this is a question. It depends on any ecological footprint which is more than the biocapacity, per capita biocapacity, is not sustainable. So to answer your question, you have to see what is the biocapacity, maximum biocapacity they have in that country, per capita biocapacity. If without destroying that per capita biocapacity, if we can maintain our consumption lifestyle, then that is sustainable. So that means we should not overshoot the ecological biocapacity by increasing our ecological footprint. So to answer your question again, for every country, the ecological footprint calculation will be different depending on their consumption lifestyle and biocapacity. So there is one answer, but it should be below the per capita biocapacity, ideally.
Thank you, sir. So I'd like to put, before allowing the participant ask a question directly to you, sir, I'd like to put one question from YouTube, sir. They are viewing your lecture in YouTube. One Raju Gogoi want to know about that. Sir, what is your view of adoption of one-side policy in our country, sir?
That's a very sensitive question. It takes a lot of time to explain, but I am not in favor of imposing one-child policy. If you see historically, all the countries, once the fertility starts dropping, it will not go back. The birth rate will never go back to high fertility. Nowhere it happened, including China. China, in fact, the one-child policy was introduced by wrong. It was a wrong step to do that because the fertility in China was already dropping. All of a sudden, they introduced the one-child policy. So more than imposing one-child policy, it is a question of women's empowerment, understanding of the reproductive right. Those are the important issues. Women's education is important. Health facilities, access to basic human rights, those are the important things. And if we do things rightly, especially women's education and women's empowerment, then the fertility rate will drop. We don't have to impose one-child policy anywhere. Like, you know, if you see many developing countries, including Bangladesh, where poverty is still very high, women are still less educated, but their fertility rate is going down because of the decision making. The Bangladesh government is taking a lot of steps to empower women in decision making. So that will be important rather than going for one-child policy imposition. That's my view. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to request all the participants to ask questions or any comments or any views you can add to our honorable resource person.
Oh, there are a few questions here.
Yes, sir.
I can read it. The last question. There are many questions there. What are the measures in Australia to protect the lands and resources of Aboriginals? That's a good question, but again, then it will take a lot of time to explain you. But what I can say is that Australia,
Yes.
in the constitution, it is now how you deal with the land, the indigenous land and the Aboriginal land. So they are very strict in that. So they are protecting it to a large extent, and it is in the constitution now. So they are very well protected. I can't go much in detail into, but what I can, my key message is that Australia is doing quite a lot now to protect the Aboriginal land from many, from outsiders. I mean, from mining companies or from any other activities. So they are considered sacred land. What is the potential cause of decrease after 2100? The potential cause after 2100 is why population will decline is because we believe that the fertility will drop. Not many people will produce children. You can see many Western societies now, it is 0 children basically. The concept of marriage, one contributing factor will be the concept of marriage is disappearing. Tamne ki hoise ajikali biya nohua hoise your society bilakor. Ajikali biyar concept to uthiye goise. Cohabitation hoy ar biya nohuar karone batcha hoaru mane ajikali kono plan teneke nai. Yeah, many Western societies have etu hoise. Heikane ki hoise batcha janmo diato khub komi goise. 2100 er pasot mur honde hoise biyar concept thakibo. Western society biyar concept to ekebare nai nohua hoy goise. Aru jodiu biya hoy yat divorce rate to khub besi. Eta Australia আমি উলিয়াও marriage rate তানে বিয়াৰ rate to বিয়া হোৱাৰ যেটো হাৰ আৰু divorce is almost equal. তাৰমানে কি হয় অষ্ট্ৰেলিয়াত এতিয়া প্ৰায় প্ৰতিখন বিয়াই ভাঙে। তানে প্ৰতিখন বিয়াই divorce so 2001 ৰ পাছত সেই আৰু বেছি হ'ব আৰু মানুহৰ কি হ'ব বাচ্চা হোৱাটো একেবাৰে কমি যাব। সেইটো second question too. But the same person has many questions. I would like to ask any other person waiting to ask question.
In chat box, Sanmohita Barkakati want to know about that. She has seen that the ecological footprint of India, which is in deficit. How do we keep our ecological footprint in check while we live a sustainable and healthy life? What would be your suggestions?
Where did you see that? Can you repeat it? Sorry.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. In India, the ecological footprint is deficits.
Okay.
How do we keep our ecological footprint in check while we live a sustainable and healthy life? What would be your suggestion, sir?
Okay. So the question is that we are already in deficit.
Yes,
but with that deficit, how we maintain a healthy life?
Yes, sir.
The question is that to maintain a healthy life, you do not have to put pressure on resources. you know, that resources, our consumption, even in India, it is growing so much, we can cut down our consumption to a large extent. As I said before, you know, I give the example of consumption of wine, consumption of meat, many other consumption, which are healthy, in fact. So we are increasing our consumption in some unhealthy activities, unhealthy consumption, which we can reduce it. If we reduce that one, then definitely we maintain our ecological footprint below the biocapacity. So this is a kind of a simple answer. It is complex, but this is where the consumption will play. So less consumption does not mean that we are not healthy. In fact, high consumption sometimes means we are not healthy.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, sir. This is the very wonderful session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a question that migration is a reason for population growth that affects our economical development also. So
Yeah.
migration is very natural for studying or job, etc. But how can we control that?
How can we control migration?
Yes.
Yeah, that is again a very sensitive and very difficult question. It depends on which country's migration you are talking about. Like if I talk from an Australian perspective and many other developed countries, like suppose in Australia, Australia is a country completely now, almost completely dependent on migration. Because Australia's fertility rate is very, very low. Now, Australia's still population is growing. 65% of the population growth is from migration. You won't believe that Australia takes 200,000 skilled migrants every year from all over the world. 200,000 every year. And that's why Australia is surviving economically and many other aspects, education-wise as well. So for some countries, migration is an asset. But for some other countries, yes, migration can create a conflict. And I can understand probably from Assam, if I discuss Assam, which is again very sensitive and I don't have much knowledge currently what's happening, but it can probably lead to some conflict. Migration can lead to some conflict. Now, it depends on the policies. Sometimes it depends if the government takes the migrant group, says, okay, you can still stay, but you need to kind of develop these migrants group equally so that they become a part of the mainstream rather than becoming a conflict. Again, it depends quite a lot on the policy. So you do not have to have an anti-migration policy always, because globally, if you see, the borders are now opening everywhere. So people are moving, you know, of course, the rich people can move easily. The poor people, of course, they cross the border illegally, but still it is a migration in one way. So it depends on the policy, it depends on the capacity of that country, what policy they implement. But my overall idea is that if there are migrants in a society, we should have a strong policy for upliftment of or development of that migrant group as well, which will help that country to have a mainstream society without conflict. And that is happening in many Western societies. In Germany, it is. A lot of people in Germany, it comes from Turkey and other neighboring developing countries. Like in Australia, nowadays, many African people are here. A lot of Indians. When I arrived in Adelaide, the city I am, we had only 5,000 Indian population here. Now it is 100,000 Indian people here. A lot of Indian shops here. A lot of Indian restaurants here, because the policy is so good for integration. It is helping us to integrate into the society, and it is really contributing to the economy. So it depends on the policy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I would like to put one question from YouTube. Anjali Burahai Sangmai, Okhomiyate Hudise, sir. পৰিৱেশ সংৰক্ষণৰ ক্ষেত্ৰত অষ্ট্ৰেলিয়া চৰকাৰৰ নীতি নিৰ্দেশনাসমূহ কেনে ধৰণৰ স্যাৰ একেটা জানিব বিচাৰিছো
নীতি নিৰ্দেশনা বুলি ক'লে বহুত দীঘল হৈ যাব মানে আৰু গোটেইখিনি মোৰ ইমান নাজানো কাৰণ বহুত ষ্টাডি লাগে কিন্তু পৰিৱেশ ৰক্ষাৰ কাৰণে পৰিৱেশ সংৰক্ষণৰ কাৰণে ইয়াৰ নীতিবিলাক বহুত ভাল বিশেষকে ইয়াৰ যেটো অষ্ট্ৰেলিয়া এখন সাগৰৰ পাৰৰ দেশ মানে সব চিটিয়ে ইয়া সাগৰৰ পাৰত সাগৰৰ কোস্টেল এৰিয়া লৈ পেলাই অষ্ট্ৰেলিয়া জিআই থকাৰ নিচিনা কিন্তু ইয়াত সেইবিলাকৰ সংৰক্ষণৰ কাৰণে বহুত ষ্ট্ৰিক্ট পলিচিজ নীতি নিয়ম আছে যিবিলাক তেওঁলোকে যথেষ্ট মানি চলে এতিয়া কাৰ্বন এমিশন যেটো হৈ আছে হেতু ৰিডিউস কৰিবৰ কাৰণে তেওঁলোকে কিছুমান যদিও ডিবেটেবল তথাপি কিছুমান পলিচিজ লৈছে জিৰো কাৰ্বন এমিশনৰ কাৰণে কিছুমান পলিচি লৈছে সোলাৰৰ কাৰণে এতিয়া যথেষ্ট এতিয়া অষ্ট্ৰেলিয়াৰ গোটেই কান্ট্ৰিখনৰ around I think around 60% ঘৰে অষ্ট্ৰেলিয়াত সোলাৰ হ'ল অকল 40% নে কিমানে বাকি আছে সোলাৰ হ'বলে গতিকে তেনেকুৱা কিছুমান আৰু সোলাৰৰ কাৰণে গভৰ্ণমেন্টে ৰিবেট দিয়ে আমি যেতিয়া সোলাৰ আমাৰ নিজৰ ঘৰত লগাইছো 50% আমি গভৰ্ণমেন্টৰ পৰা পাইছো ৰিবেট পাইছো গতিকে সেইবিলাক সহায় যথেষ্ট কৰিছে আৰু তেওঁলোকে they are going in the right direction এটা সঠিক দিশত গৈ আছে কিন্তু at the same time I should say that individual consumption to ইমান ঠিক হোৱা নাই গভৰ্ণমেন্ট পলিচি বিলাক ঠিকে আছে বহুত ডিবেট আছে কিন্তু যথেষ্ট ষ্ট্ৰিক্ট আৰু এটা যথেষ্ট ওপৰলৈ লৈ গৈছে
Thank you, sir. So one Raju Gogoi is raising hand. Please, Raju Gogoi, sir, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, মই Raju Gogoi. Namaskar, sir.
Okay, namaskar.
Hi. ময়ো পপুলেশ্যন জিঅ'গ্ৰাফি শিকিছিলো তথাপিও স্যাৰ মনত এটা হেৰি হৈ আছে মানে কোৱেশ্চন এটা আহি আছে বহুত দিন ধৰি যে এতিয়া আমাৰ ভাৰতবৰ্ষত যিমানখিনি প্ৰবলেম আমি দেখা পাইছো বা ফেচ কৰিছো সকলোবোৰৰ মূল হৈছে পপুলেশ্যন এক্সপ্লোজন হেতু লাগিলে বানপানীয়ে হওক আৰু হেতু লাগিলে আমাৰ এডুকেশ্যনৰ সমস্যাই হওক বা হেলথ প্ৰবলেমে হওক হেলথৰ সমস্যাই হওক এতিয়া আমাৰ এই ক্ষেত্ৰত মানে যদি মই যে অলপ আগতে সুধিলো ওৱান চাইল্ড পলিচি বাৰু নকৰিম কিন্তু এই যে ধৰক 80 বছৰলৈকে আমাৰ পপুলেশ্যনটো ইনক্ৰিজিং হৈ গৈ আছে বাঢ়ি গৈ আছে আৰু এটা পপুলেশ্যন টোটাল পপুলেশ্যন বাঢ়ি গৈছে কিন্তু ৰেটটো কমি গৈছে ঠিকে আছে কিন্তু 80 বছৰলৈ আমাৰ দেশৰ প্ৰাকৃতিক সম্পদ প্ৰায় নাইকিয়া হৈ যাব এই ক্ষেত্ৰত কি ব্যৱস্থা কৰিলে ভাল হয় বাৰু
মই যিটো কোৱেশ্চনটো ভাল মই যিটো কথা কৈছিলো মই যে কৈছো যে পপুলেশ্যনটোকে ব্লেম কৰাটো উচিত নহয় কাৰণ তোমাৰ যিটো প্ৰথম ষ্টেটমেন্ট তুমি কৈছা পপুলেশ্যন এক্সপ্লোশনটোৰ কাৰণে হৈছে সেইটো আচলতে খুব সঁচা নহয় কাৰণ এখন বৃহৎ কান্ট্ৰি হলেও আমি যদি ঠিক আমাৰ বহুত ইস্যুজ আছে আমাৰ কান্ট্ৰিত আমি খুব দুখীয়া কান্ট্ৰি নহয়তো ভাৰত আমাৰ কাৰেপচনটো ইমান বেছি বহুত বেলেগ কিছুমান ইস্যু আছে মোৰ কথাটো হৈছে কি যে আমি যিখিনি পপুলেশ্যন আছে আমি সেই পপুলেশ্যন খিনি যদি পপুলেশ্যন ষ্টাডিজৰ বেকগ্ৰাউণ্ডৰ পৰা আহিছে এটা পপুলেশ্যন ডিভিডেণ্ড বুলি এটা কনচেপ্ট আছে পপুলেশ্যন ডিভিডেণ্ড হৈছে কি কেনেকে ইকনমিক্যালি এক্টিভ হাই পপুলেশ্যন হলেও কেনেকে ইকনমিক্যালি এক্টিভ পপুলেশ্যন খিনিক এডুকেশ্যনৰ ইনভেষ্টমেন্ট কৰি পেলাই অৰ্থনীতিক আগবাঢ়িব পাৰে সাউথ কোৰিয়া এটা খুব ভাল উদাহৰণ এই ইকনমিক ডিভিডেণ্ড পৰা সাউথ কোৰিয়াৰ অৱস্থাও বহুত আগতে আজি 40 বছৰ মান আগতে খুব হাই ফাৰ্টিলিটি আছিল তাতেও পপুলেশ্যন গ্ৰোথ বিৰাট আছিল কিন্তু তাহাঁতি ইকনমিক ডিভিডেণ্ড কনচেপ্টটো এতিয়া ইয়াত এক্সপ্লেইন কৰিবলৈ অলপ দিগদাৰ যেতিয়া তাহাঁতৰ হাই ফাৰ্টিলিটি পপুলেশ্যন গ্ৰো কৰি আছিল তেতিয়া তাহাঁতি বহুত খৰচ কৰিলে সেই ইয়াং জেনেৰেশ্যনটোৰ কাৰণে শিক্ষা দীক্ষাৰ কাৰণে তেতিয়া সেইখিনি তাহাঁতি ডিভিডেণ্ড তাৰমানে তাহাঁতি আছে এতিয়া যদি সাউথ কোৰিয়া চোৱা তাহাঁতি স্যামসাং কিয়া মটৰ্ছ এইবিলাক সব টেকনলজি তাহাঁতৰ কাৰণ তাতে ভেৰি হাইলি স্কিল্ড পপুলেশ্যন এটা আছে এই ডিভিডেণ্ডটো যদি গভৰ্ণমেণ্টে সজাগ হয় তেনেহলে যদি ইনভেষ্টমেন্টটো তেনেকে কৰে কাৰণ এইটো মই মানি নলওঁ যে আমাৰ ক্ষমতা নাই এইটো নহয় Population of blame query is education of our allocation. Our budget of allocation for education is very less. Khub kom. Education or kind of Borholla like health or kind of Borholla like Gotike, etia বহুত উপায় আছে যে আমি এটা সবল মানে জনসংখ্যা পাব পাৰো খুব স্কিল জনসংখ্যা পাব পাৰো সেইবিলাক উপায় আছে আৰু অন্য কান্ট্ৰিত এইবিলাক দেখা গৈছে গতিকে অকল পপুলেশনটোক ব্লেম কৰিলে আমি দুখীয়া মানুহখিনিক ব্লেম কৰাৰ নিচিনা হয় কাৰণ ম্যাক্সিমাম ল'ৰা-ছোৱালী বাহি আছে এতিয়া দুখীয়া মানুহখিনিৰ মাজত ধনী মানুহটো আজিকালি ইমান ল'ৰা-ছোৱালী
জন্ম নিদিয়ে
গতিকে আমি সাৱধান হোৱা উচিত যাতে আমি দুখীয়া মানুহখিনিকে ঘপককে ব্লেমটো দি নিদিও পপুলেশন গ্ৰোথ বুলি পেলাই কাৰণ
তাৰ হেৰি লাগিব তাৰ কাৰণে এটা প্লেনিং লাগিব ভাল প্লেনিং এটা লাগিব তেতিয়া
প্লেনিং লাগিব এডুকেশন তোমাৰ এতিয়া এটা কনসেপ্ট আছে আনমেট নিড বুলি আনমেট নিড মানে কন্ট্ৰাসেপশন যেটো অসমীয়াত কি ক'ব ৰবা গৰ্ভ নিৰোধ কৰাৰ কাৰণে কন্ট্ৰাসেপশন ইউজ কৰে এতিয়াও মানে বহুত গাঁৱৰ মহিলা আছে যি মানে গৰ্ভ নিৰোধৰ বা কন্ট্ৰাসেপটিভৰ কোনো হেৰিয়ে নাজানে তোমাৰ এটো আনমেট নিড বুলি কয় ইণ্ডিয়া ইজ ভেৰি ভেৰি হাই তাৰমানে তেওঁলোকে এটো নহয় যে তেওঁলোকে সন্তান প্ৰডিউস কৰিম বুলি কৰি আছে কিন্তু এক্সেছটো নাপায় সুবিধা নাপায় যেটো কাৰণে হেৰি কৰিব লগা হয় অকল মহিলা গৰাকীয়ে নহয় হাজবেণ্ড জনেও নাজানিব পাৰে গতিকে নেশনাল
এৱাৰনেছ
সাৰ্ভে যেটো কৰিছে ইণ্ডিয়াত তাতে তুমি ডাটাখিনি পাবা তাত গম পাবা তুমি যদি সোৱা আনমেট নিড is still very very high.
Thank you sir.
Thank you sir.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes. Who is asking? What's name?
Sir, I'm Sangeeta Saikia from London Saikia College.
Okay, Sangeeta, yes please.
Sir, your session was indeed very fruitful and informative. So as you have said that the population will be declining by the year 2100 and most of the countries have already adopted some population control measures. So I think there will be some problems like the earth will have more elderly population compared to the younger generations. So I think some problems will arise then because already people have adopted, they have already started adopting the population control measures and they have already have one child norms. So what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is about, we are talking about the aging society. It's called population aging. It is not happening only in developed countries, it is also happening in developing countries, like in China. Like the proportion of elderly population is increasing.
Yes.
Yeah, it is putting a pressure on, and this is a very good question. In fact, this is one of the biggest crises that we are going to face in the future.
Near future, yes, sir.
Yeah, it will happen in India as well because we are not producing that many babies anymore. So the elderly population, the life expectancy is going up. People are living longer. So the only difference is that in developed countries, the aging, the support from the government is fantastic. Like here in Australia, the old age support they get from the government you can't compare it to many countries. So aging is increasing in developed countries, but they are also investing quite a lot to support the elderly population to have a healthy life. But that will be a very challenging one for developing countries like India because we do not have a very strong old age pension system. We do not have a very good old age support system. Our elderly people used to get support from the joint family system, isn't it? Like the sons and
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And because we have low fertility now, this is more kind of a nuclear family, and they are becoming isolated. And I fully understand what you are saying, and that is a challenge. And again, it will depend quite a lot on the government policies. And I can see that we will, in future, countries like India and China will face not just a population explosion problem, not a population growth problem, but is aging will be a big issue. And we need to kind of, we already face it. So we need to have a very strong policy to support the elderly people, what we can do. Like in Australia now, in some sectors, there is no retirement days. They want to keep the old people, if they want to go to the work, you can go. Like in university sector where I work, we do not have a retirement days. if I want to work as a professor for next 30 up to 100 years, মই যদি জীয়াই থাকো 100 years, মই যদি আহিব পাৰো মোক দৰমহা দিয়ে থাকিব, মোৰ retirement is নাই তেনেকে. In they call it the official retirement, normally it is in the paper that 65, but there is no strict rule here. In many sectors it is like that. তুমি যেতিয়ালৈকে কিন্তু বহুতে retire লৈ লয় কিয়নো because they have a very good support system, and I probably won't come after the age of 80 because I want to enjoy my own life. So that is the system here, and in that case there's a big difference between developed and developing countries. Developed countries has the capacity, whereas developing countries do not have, and unfortunately I do not have a clear answer what we will do to support the aging population in country like India and many other developing countries. But in China, you will, very interesting example I will give you. China have changed the one-child policy. I think you know about it. Now they allow you to have 2 or 3 children.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They were rewarding their citizens also, sir, to have more children.
And you, মই কিন্তু এটা example দিও সকলোকে অসমীয়া.
Hi, sir.
জাপানতো হৈছে কি বাট আজিকালি বাচ্চা নহয়. So Japan has a very high proportion of elderly people. এতিয়া জাপানত কি কৰিছে, local government বিলাকে বাচ্চা জন্ম হবৰ কাৰণে ইনসেন্টিভ দিয়ে লোকেল গভৰ্নমেন্টে. এতিয়া কি কৰে তাত জাপানত আজিকালি বিয়াও নহয়, খুব কম বিয়া হয়. এখানে কি কৰিছে, এতিয়া যদি মই বিয়াৰ বয়স হৈছে, মোৰ গাৰ্লফ্ৰেণ্ড বা কোনো বিচাৰি পোৱা নাই, তেতিয়াহলে যদি কেনেবাকে মই বিচাৰি পাওঁ গাৰ্লফ্ৰেণ্ড, তেতিয়াহলে কি কৰে লোকেল গভৰ্নমেন্টে মোক পইচা দিয়ে, both girl and the boy পইচা দিয়ে 3 দিন নে 4 দিন হোটেলত থাকিবলৈ, খোৱা বোৱা খৰচ দিয়ে. আলটিমেট এইমটো হৈছে কি বাচ্চা জন্ম দিয়া. It is an official rule in some of the local governments in Japan. So dating ot jabor karone paisa diye Japanese government, kitu man target kore je tahati goi pela eta bachcha hau. Sei tene dhoroner policy many developed countries ot etia enoka gondogol hoise. Mane bachcha beshi koribor karone je Australia is so dependent on migration, but at one point one of the ministers said no, we cannot always depend on migration. Ami migration opor kiman depend kori thakim, amar nijor bachcha hobo lage. সেইকাৰণে তাহাঁতি কি কৰিলে, ইয়াতে অষ্ট্ৰেলিয়াত year 2000 ইন্ট্ৰডিউস কৰিলে বেবি বোনাস মানে এটা বাচ্চা হলে ইৰেসপেক্টিভ অফ মাই ইনকাম $7,000 দিয়ে. মই নিজে পাইছো, মোৰ প্ৰথম ছোৱালী জন্ম হওঁতে মই হঠাতে পোষ্টত হস্পিটেলৰ পৰা অহা 3 দিনৰ পাছতে এটা চেক পাইছো, এখন চেক তাত লিখা আছে আই থিংক around 7,000, পাহৰি গলো, $7,000 বেবি বোনাস directly. কিন্তু কোটো লিখা নাই কি কৰিব লাগিব, বেবি বোনাস বুলি কৈছে, কিন্তু it did not work. এটা পইচা দিছিল যদিও একো কাম নহলে, বাৰ্থ ৰেট ওপৰলে নগল. But they are going a bit crazy in developed countries to have more young people, but it is going to be challenging. It's a good question.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. There are a lot of questions, but due to the limitation of time, we'd like to this interaction. We'd like to conclude this interaction session. Thank you, sir, Saikia sir, for your wonderful interaction with our participants and also deliberation. Now over to Jonali Saikia Barkaroli, madam.
Okay, I'll have a few last words after Jonali, okay, or maybe before that. Is it all right?
Okay, sir. Okay, no problem.
Okay, Jonali agote moi koilo moi ako দিছো পুরা সকলো কিতাবৰ বাহিলে আৰু বৰহুলাৰ বাহিলে নাজানো আজি এলেঙিৰ পৰা কোনবাই চাই আছে যদি কিন্তু আকৌ পিছৰবা হয়তো যাম ডেফিনেটলি কিতাবৰলে. আৰু মই মোৰ ধন্যবাদ দিছো তিতাবৰ কলেজৰ আনন্দনাথ শইকীয়া কলেজৰ প্ৰিন্সিপাল মহোদয় আৰু বৰহুলা কলেজৰ প্ৰিন্সিপাল মহোদয়ক মোৰ ধন্যবাদ দিছো. আৰু দুইখন কলেজৰ কোঅৰ্ডিনেটৰ দুইগৰাকীকে মই আন্তৰিক ধন্যবাদ দিছো ফ্লিণ্ডাৰ্ছ ইউনিভাৰ্চিটি ফালৰ পৰা হৈ পেলাই. আৰু মই খুব ভাল লাগিলে, ডেফিনেটলি আকৌ ইন্টাৰেক্ট কৰিবলৈ পালে আকৌ মই ভাল পাম, নিশ্চয় আহিম. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Uday Saikia sir. আমি এতিয়া তা সুন্দৰ আমি এখন ৱেবিনাৰ আজি এনজয় কৰিলো বুলি আমি সকলোৱে অনুভৱ কৰিছো আৰু কমেন্ট বিলাকতো আমি দেখিছো যে সকলোৱে বহুত ভাল ভাল কমেন্ট কৰি আছে বহুত মানে বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ আমি সাধাৰণতে আমি জনসংখ্যা বৃদ্ধিক আমি সকলো সমস্যাৰে জুৰি বুলি আমি বিলীন কৰি থাকো কিন্তু আচলতে সেইটো নহয় প্ৰকাশ পাইছো আৰু মই আশা কৰিছো সকলোৱে আজি এই ৱেবিনাৰখনৰ পৰা নিজকে যথেষ্ট সমৃদ্ধ কৰিব পাৰিছে আৰু তাৰ কাৰণে মই আমাৰ ৰিচাৰ্চ পাৰ্চনক মই যথেষ্ট ধন্যবাদ জ্ঞাপন কৰিছো আৰু আমি সকলোৱে ইতিমধ্যে গম পাইছো যে ৰিচাৰ্চ পাৰ্চন যদিও ফ্লিণ্ডাৰ্ছ ইউনিভাৰ্চিটিৰ পৰা আমি আনিছো কিন্তু আচলতে ৰিচাৰ্চ পাৰ্চন হৈছে আমাৰ নিজৰ মানুহ আমাৰ তিতাবৰ এলেনিয়ে মানুহ গতিকে আমি সকলোৱে বিশেষকৈ ছাত্ৰ ছাত্ৰীসকলকো মই কৈছো যে আমি গৌৰৱ কৰিব পাৰো বাল্য ভৱনত পঢ়ি এতিয়া উদয় শইকীয়া এজন গ্লোবেল স্কলাৰ তেওঁ গ্লোবেল স্কলাৰ হিচাপে এতিয়া নিজৰ আইডেন্টিটি দেখুৱাব পাৰিছে পৃথিৱীত গতিকে আমি সকলোৱে তেওঁ আদৰ্শ আমি ল'ব পাৰো এনকাৰেজ হ'ব পাৰো বিশেষকৈ ষ্টুডেণ্টসকলক মই কৈছো ৰিচাৰ্চ স্কলাৰসকলক কৈছো আৰু আজি ইমানখিনি সময় আমাৰ লগত কটাইছে ইমান সুন্দৰকে আমাক কথাখিনি সকলোকে বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ পাৰ্সপেক্টিভৰ পৰা আমাক মানে হাইলাইট কৰিছে তেওঁ গতিকে তেখেতক আমি ধন্যবাদ জ্ঞাপন কৰিছো আৰু এতিয়া মই আমাৰ মোৰ কো-কোঅৰ্ডিনেটৰ বৰ্ণালী কলিতা দত্ত বাইদেউ মই ভোট অফ থেংকছ দিবৰ কাৰণে অনুৰোধ কৰিছো বৰ্ণালী বাইদেউ
Madam, unmute yourself.
শুনা পাইছেনে জনালী বাইদেউ
হেল্ল'
good afternoon to all of you over here in this platform participating for successful completion of this concerned international webinar on population growth, natural resources and human conflict organized jointly by Department of Economics, Borholla College and Department of Geography, Nandanath Saikia College, Titabor. I am Bornali Kolita, Joint Convener of this webinar and Vice Principal of Borholla College. Today, on this occasion, I would like to thank our one and only Honorable Resource Person, Dr. Uday Saikia Sir, Associate Professor, College of Humanities, Arts and Science, Flinders University, Australia. I must confess that it is our privilege to have Dr. Saikia amongst us, and we are happy that Dr. Saikia, who is employed in Australia, actually belongs to our locality, Titabor. Sir, I, on behalf of our organizing team on this webinar, would like to thank you a lot for the way you have imparted your concepts as well as ideas so interestingly with us. I am sure that all participants have got something new to learn today. তিতাবৰবাসীৰ হৈ আমি সকলোৱে আমাৰ শ্ৰদ্ধাৰ উদয় শইকীয়া ছাৰক শুভেচ্ছা জনাইছো আৰু ইমানকণ সময় দিয়াৰ বাবে তেখেতলৈ আন্তৰিক ধন্যবাদ যাচিছো আৰু লগতে তেখেতৰ ভৱিষ্যত সুস্বাস্থ্য তথা দীৰ্ঘায়ু কামনা কৰি পুনৰ তেখেতলৈ আমি ধন্যবাদ যাচিছো থ্যাংক ইউ স্যাৰ
আপোনালোকৰ মৰমৰ আশীৰ্বাদৰ কাৰণে মই ধন্যবাদ ইয়াৰ পৰা জনাইছো আৰু এনেকুৱাকে মৰমৰ আশীৰ্বাদ পালে এঘণ্টা নহয় মই এদিনো কটাব আৰু বেছি দিনো কটাব পাৰো কৈ কৈ গতিকে please feel free to contact me whenever you'd like to kind of join me for some discussion. I'm more than happy to assist both the colleges, Borholla College and Titabor College. যদি কিবা আমি ইয়াৰ পৰা সহায় কৰিব পাৰো পঢ়া শুনাৰ ক্ষেত্ৰত বা এনিথিং কোভিডৰ সিচুৱেচনৰ সময়ত যেহেতু আমি ইয়াত কেনেকৈ সহায় আছো সেই কথা যদি শ্বেয়াৰ কৰিব লগা হয় তেতিয়াহ'লে মই more than happy to share with you and thank you very much again আপোনালোকৰ মৰমৰ আশীৰ্বাদৰ কাৰণে thank you
ধন্যবাদ স্যাৰ আমি আপোনাক সদায় কাষতে বিচাৰিম আশা কৰোঁ আপুনিও আমাক সহায় দিব। Thank you, sir.
Thank
I
you.
convey my gratitude and sincere vote of thanks to Dr. Litul Borua, sir, Principal of Nandanath Saikia College, Titavor, for being the inaugurated of this program and his inaugural speech. I would like to thank Mr. Biren Dutta, Principal of Borholla College, for his warm welcome speech. I must thank Dr. Rana Bora, Coordinator of IQAC Borholla College, and this program technical advisor. I also offer my genuine heartfelt gratitude and thanks to all the organizing team of this webinar for great success, and specially thanks to Dr. Junali Saikia Borkakoti ma'am for her continuous efforts by communicating with a resource person. I would like to offer my vote of thanks to Mr. Nilutpal Saikia, owner of Green Plaza, for doing a lot of work to make this webinar successfully. And I thank Raktim Diju of our college for sincerely controlling technical sides. And thank you all who are involved with us in making this program. At last, but not the least, I heartily thank to all the participants without whom this webinar would not have been thought a successful as well as complete one. Finally, I would like to conclude this webinar. Hope you all enjoy it. Thank you and stay safe. Hand over to convener, moderator, Dr. Junali Saikia. Thank you.
Thank you, Borali Kolita বাইদেউ। আমি এতিয়া আমাৰ আজি ৱেবিনাৰৰ শেষ পৰ্যায়ত আমি উপস্থিত হৈছোঁ। ময়ো মোৰ ফালৰ পৰা নন্দনাথ শইকীয়া মহাবিদ্যালয়ৰ পৰা বৰহলা কলেজৰ অৰ্থনীতি বিভাগৰ কেইগৰাকী সদস্যলৈ আন্তৰিক ধন্যবাদ জ্ঞাপন কৰিছোঁ। তেখেতসকলে আৰু আমাৰ সদস্যসকলকো আমাৰ বিভাগৰ নন্দনাথ শইকীয়া মহাবিদ্যালয়ৰ ভূগোল বিজ্ঞান বিভাগৰ আটাইকেইগৰাকী সদস্যলৈ মই আন্তৰিক ধন্যবাদ জ্ঞাপন কৰিছোঁ। আমি সকলোৱে লগ লাগি আজি এটা ভাল কাম কৰিছোঁ বুলি আমি অনুভৱ কৰিছোঁ। আৰু আমাৰ বিশেষকৈ আমি ধন্যবাদ জ্ঞাপন কৰিছোঁ আমাৰ পাৰ্টিচিপেণ্টসকলক। তেখেতসকলৰ যিটো সহযোগ আমাক দেখুৱালে আৰু তেখেতসকলে ইমান এক্টিভলি আজি ইয়াত আমাক পাৰ্টিচিপেট কৰিছে, গতিকে তেখেতসকললৈ আমি আমাৰ আন্তৰিক ধন্যবাদ জ্ঞাপন কৰিছোঁ অৰ্গেনাইজিং কমিটিৰ ফালৰ পৰা। আৰু বৰহলা কলেজৰ ভূগোল বিজ্ঞান বিভাগৰ ডক্টৰ ৰাণা বৰা গোটেই টেকনিকেল সেকশনটো তেওঁ খুব সুন্দৰকৈ আমাক পৰিচালনা কৰি দিলে, গতিকে মই মোৰ ফালৰ পৰাও তেখেতক আন্তৰিক ধন্যবাদ জ্ঞাপন কৰিছোঁ। আৰু আমি নিশ্চয় আমাৰ ৰিচাৰ্চ পাৰ্চন উদয় শইকীয়া ছাৰক আমি পুনৰ বিচাৰিম, আমাৰ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ কাৰ্যসূচীত আমি বিচাৰিম, আমি তেখেতৰ দিহা পৰামৰ্শ আমি ল'ম। আৰু আমাৰ দুখন কলেজেই নহয়, আজি আমাৰ ইয়াত যিমান পাৰ্টিচিপেণ্ট আছে বেলেগ বেলেগ ইনষ্টিটিউচনৰ বেলেগ বেলেগ কলেজৰ তেখেতসকলেও তেখেতক লগ পাব পাৰিব। তেখেতসকলে আজি নিশ্চয় তেখেতৰ তথ্যখিনি উপকৃত হৈছে, তেখেতৰ বক্তৃতাৰ দ্বাৰা উপকৃত হৈছে, গতিকে তেখেতসকলেও তেখেতক যোগাযোগ কৰিব পাৰিব। আমি সকলোকে সেইটো কৰিবৰ কাৰণে অনুৰোধ কৰিছোঁ। আৰু বাকী আজি আমি এই শেষ পৰ্যায়ত আমি ভাবিছোঁ আমি আজি এই অনুষ্ঠানটো যি উদ্দেশ্যে আমি অনুষ্ঠিত কৰিছিলোঁ এই ৱেবিনাৰখন আমি নিশ্চয় সফল হৈছোঁ বুলি আমি আশা কৰিছোঁ। আৰু শেষত সকলোলৈকে মোৰ আন্তৰিক ধন্যবাদ আৰু কৃতজ্ঞতা জনাইছোঁ। আৰু আজি আমাৰ এই অনুষ্ঠান ইমানতে সমাপ্ত হৈছে বুলি ঘোষণা কৰিছোঁ। ধন্যবাদ।
Thank you. ধন্যবাদ।
Thank you.
ঠিক আছে,